I'm here in the rainforest at Mary Cairncross Reserve near Maleny on the Queensland Sunshine Coast, and reflecting on the month of August. Today's Thursday, the 27th of August, and if I was to summarise the month of August in one word, the word would be permaculture. Yesterday, I left Crystal Waters Permaculture Village, having arrived there on Saturday the 1st of August, to attend a permaculture design certificate course run by the amazing Robin Clayfield. So there's been a lot of permaculture in this last month, which I suppose begs the question, what is permaculture? Which is a good question, and it's a question that was asked very early on at the start of the course, for which we could all think about our own answers as to what we wanted to define permaculture as. And so, good morning. And so for me, permaculture, well, I suppose at the time I enrolled for the course, someone asked me what I thought permaculture was. Good morning. I have to try and remember to remain a little bit quiet so I don't scare the birds too much. Someone asked me around the time I enrolled the course, what is permaculture? And at the time I said it's the answer to the world's problems. And so when the question was asked on the course, what is permaculture? I did have to sit with it. I just sort of, sat in the silence. There was 18 of us doing the course, and so we were all given a blank piece of paper on which to write our own definition of permaculture and contribute it to the broader definitions. And what I wrote is it's a way to bring humanity back into harmony with the planet. So permaculture was a word conceived in the 1970s. Just like me, I was conceived in the 1970s by Bill Mollison and David Holmgren out of Tasmania. And sort of on the back of, I guess, the 1970s energy crisis of rising petrol prices and fuel prices and conflict in the Middle East. Sounds familiar. My journey to permaculture requires a bit of a backstory about, I guess, the journey of my life to some extent. So I'll try not to get too comfortable on the therapist's couch and try to keep this at the high level summary, but it's a rabbit hole I might go down. I love this beautiful big red cedar that is behind me. My God, it is gorgeous. So my journey to permaculture, I'm going to try and summarize my life before discovering the word permaculture into two very broad categories. One childhood and one adulthood. And so my childhood, I guess, preschool years, my parents divorced when I was about 3 years old. When my parents divorced, they decided to have this arrangement where my brother and I spent our primary school years mostly with my mum, and then high school years mostly with my dad. So that was the agreement they came up with, which were two quite different lifestyles. So my primary school years with my mum was in a rural environment out on a bush block on the foothills of the Blue Mountains. We lived in a caravan for a couple of years while getting a house built. Very earthy childhood, playing in the bush. My mum was into all sorts of alternative 70s hippie stuff, making mud bricks, growing veggies, doing compost. Some of my favourite childhood memories from my sort of primary school years on my mum's side was roaming around in the bush with our Great Dane named Brutus and just exploring, and that sense of freedom and playfulness and being out in nature. And then, the high school years, I guess the other interesting aspects of my mum's side of life was there was also a time where she was learning massage, and so and healing touch, and so I grew up around that as well, which was a beautiful thing to experience. So a lot of heart-centered sort of life, I guess. Whereas my high school years, which were with my dad, were quite different lifestyle. My dad lived very urban around cities. He was a founder in a software company. So we lived in sort of high socioeconomic areas and I was blessed with the ability to have computers around the home from a young age and to have my own computer as probably a preteen in the 80s. So very rational, logical, mind-based. My dad wasn't particularly materialistic, but it was a very comfortable, well-off lifestyle, and I guess was surrounded by people that were more materialistic. So then apple doesn't drop far from the tree in terms of, I guess, my adult life was primarily more paternal focused, my dad's side. I studied a Bachelor of Information Technology at the University of Technology, Sydney. I ended up working for an IT consulting company and doing lots of work with big household names, doing IT consulting work. The short story of my adult life was what I'm just calling the traditional life, which was work, marriage, family, mortgage. I guess that was the first part of that traditional, and then what I'm probably calling the more modern traditional aspect, which was divorce, redundancy, mental health challenges. So after all of that, I was in a rebuilding sort of stage of life. And so at the start of 2020, I had been in what I call my Brady Bunch relationship, which was this beautiful big blended family. We had 5 teenage kids for a while. I was running my own business. I had, was applying my IT skills in a way that felt really beneficial for me to be working with not-for-profits. And I'd also sort of bought my dream property, big bush block, a couple of hours outside of Sydney, that backed onto a national park, this beautiful remote location, and I was using that as like a weekend camping retreat to just be able to go bush. And as part of the blended family, we had 2 big rescue dogs, mastiff ridgeback crosses, so there was an element of reliving my childhood of being out in nature and roaming around with big dogs that I really loved. But 2020, that was the big tumultuous year of COVID, so I guess that was the first real turning point that led me towards permaculture. And it was the moment of standing in the supermarket aisle looking at the empty shelves and just thinking, well, this is not good. In many ways, sort of questioning my lifestyle choices all the way back to that sort of split between my mum's side and my dad's side, of thinking, well, all these complex systems that I'd made a living out of working with and the information technology side of, when they break, there's no way to sustain myself. And so I went looking for, as you do, went looking for answers and got onto YouTube and was, Googling preppers and all this sort of stuff, and came across a video by Jeff Lawton called Surviving Collapse, Designing for Abundance. And that was the first time I'd heard the word permaculture. And, the idea of food forests and just walking around and having nature, the abundance of nature working for you to provide food, it really struck a chord. And so I started searching around and found a course offered by Penny Pyatt from Permaculture Sydney Institute, which was literally 5 minutes down the road from where my remote property was. So I'm like, well, that's an interesting coincidence. And so, I enrolled in an Introduction to Permaculture course, not knowing that by the time I finished that course a couple of months later, that I would have ended the relationship I was in, and I shut down the business that I was running during those COVID times. I transitioned back to being an employee and, joined a company where it was just entirely remote work, which was one of the real positives out of COVID, I guess, for me, was the fact that it did just open up that opportunity to be doing my job from anywhere. In fact, I had to be doing my job remotely. And so on the back of all those experiences, I guess I was sort of planning out this life of becoming a hermit, of going bush. People were too hard. My relationships were not working out. I think I'd realised that I didn't know how to love myself, so how could I actually love anybody else? And so I just sort of needed to go and be a hermit out in the bush and try to learn to grow vegetables. And so that was the plan for a few years. But one of the other great things I got out of that introduction to permaculture was the connections. It was sort of the meeting of people, and I got involved in some of the local permaculture activities, including every 3 months, Penny would run perma bees, like working bees on her permaculture farm. And that would bring in, people doing things like woofing, which I'd never heard of, which is, working on organic farms all around the world. And so I got to meet some people through that, including this person that was traveling around in a van and didn't have a job, didn't have a home, didn't have any plan about where they would be in the next week. And I was just sort of gobsmacked and went, what? That's allowed? Like, this sounds amazing. And in the same week or so of having met that person, my best mate's dad died. And so I took the 8-hour drive to go attend the funeral. And it was this I had a VW multivan at the time, which was more of a people mover, but I converted it into a bit of a van life thing for the weekend, or a few days road trip. And so I had this mini taste of a van life road trip, of just following the flow of energy and just seeing where it would take me. And it was amazing, and just stopping off at beaches and seeing people rock up in their vans with their surfboards on the roof and looking at the waves and deciding whether to go surfing or not. And that little taste of van life definitely got me thinking again about what was the right direction for me, and also particularly my best mate's dad's funeral. I'm the kind of person that enjoys going to a funeral, if that can be said without being judged, because it's fascinating to reflect on life. I don't think we talk enough about death. I think, to reflect on life and just to hear all these inspiring things he'd done. And I said to him afterwards, I'm like, wow, it feels like I've got to get on and do something with my life. Up to that point, I guess I didn't really feel like I'd been achieving much. So yeah, that idea took hold in this sort of gradual pivot towards van life, which I suppose brings me a bit up to speed to where I was, over the last year. I was still working remotely and traveling around in my van. And then around April this year, I guess another turning point back towards permaculture. And again, triggered by survival instincts, maybe chaos. Oh no, I don't want to use the word fear, but this realization that the job I was doing, I had to sort of almost accept the reality that artificial intelligence was going to be able to do a much better job than me. I mean, I was working remotely. Everything I was doing was in a digital space, and all of that can be replaced by artificial intelligence. And so I was sort of like, well, this digital realm doesn't really do much for me anymore. So yeah, I quit that job with the plan of traveling to the Kimberleys and started driving off. And about a week after I quit my job, the idea of permaculture came back up, and I'd had a conversation with Penny Pyatt in her mandala garden, which interestingly enough is the same mandala garden that I met the van lifer, where we were pulling weeds together and discussing the future in van life. And that's exactly what Penny and I were doing in the mandala garden as well, sitting there pulling weeds. And at the time I had my property on the market, and I'd sort of said that the place felt a bit too remote and I was looking for more community. And she said, oh, well, you should explore Crystal Waters and the Permaculture Village and Robin Clayfield. And when she said it, I went, yeah, nice idea, but that's not for me. But obviously I did remember it, because I then sent off a quick email to Robin, who I actually met on New Year's Day at Woodford, at a beautiful ceremony on New Year's Day. And so, yeah, I just sort of fired off an email saying, I see you're running a PDC this year. What's the plan for next year? Because I don't know. I really want to go travelling to the Kimberleys. I'm not sure I'm ready to commit to doing a PDC. And she remembered me, and she replied back, and she sort of said, oh, and by the way, the early bird discount closes in 2 days' time. And so I'm like, okay, I'm not going to, I am curious enough, and I've been given the guidance. And so I enrolled. And as a complete aside, yesterday I had the pleasure of actually repaying the early bird discount and putting it towards a fund that Robin has for funding people to do the permaculture design certificate that would otherwise not be able to afford it. So that was a lovely little way to repay the guidance. So yeah, I pivoted. I changed plans from going to the Kimberleys to coming to the Sunshine Coast to do the Permaculture Design Certificate. Which brings me to the course, the actual Permaculture Design Certificate course. I suppose there's 3 areas to talk about for the course, which is the content, the connections, and then I guess the place where it was run. And so if I think about the content, and Robin, if you're watching with much apologies, I've already offended Robin because I said I was just going to recycle the certificate and don't bother printing me one. And now I'll rub salt in that wound with the greatest of love and respect for Robin. I'm going to summarise the permaculture course by the phrase "pissing in shit." So one of the things we did was create a hot compost, which is the idea of creating compost within sort of 18 to 20 days. And so it's something we did as a group to create the compost. I guess the thing about why I like this story of the compost is because I think it's just such a good analogy for life. So there's a recipe for creating compost. There's the ingredients you've got to put in. It's about 1/3 of brown stuff, which for us was straw, and then 1/3 of, which is the carbon side, 1/3 of green stuff, which is nitrogen, which for us was a mix of sort of grass clippings and a certain type of weed that we had collected that Robin knew was high in nitrogen, and then 1/3 of manure, which for us was goat shit. And so you layer all these things, and there's a process by which you then every couple of days measure it and observe it and check the temperature of it. And there's a certain temperature range that is ideal for having the process kick through. And I think it's sort of around 54 degrees Celsius, thereabouts. And so we would check it, and if it needed adjustment, we would adjust it. And nitrogen is the best accelerator in some instances. And my sisters to another mister, they know who they are. I don't need to name them. Certainly there's nothing more of a bonding experience than pissing in the compost to help accelerate the process. So we haven't quite got round to printing the t-shirts for that yet to say nitrogen accelerator, but maybe we will. So yeah, I mean, sometimes you need to piss in the shit, but other times you don't. We were learning about composting toilets, and sometimes you need to keep your urine separate, and sometimes it's okay to mix it. And so my tongue-in-cheek summary of permaculture content of pissing in shit, it's about knowing when and how, and understanding the design of when to do all these things, having the right recipe and instructions to produce the outcomes you want. And the other aspect of the content that's probably not really strictly permaculture related, but Robin's such a great facilitator. She also runs like group dynamics courses. And so one of the things we did early on in the course was some trust games. And my favourite, I loved all of them, but I think my favourite was a game called Rainforest, where at some point, sort of early on in the process, we randomly connected with someone, another participant, another student, and we had to come up with a word that is like a compound word, a word that is made up of 2 words that can be on their own, like rainforest. Rain is its own word and forest is its own word. And so I was partnered with my brother from another mother, the amazingly talented and wonderful AJ. And I was book and he was shelf. And then we sort of forgot about that. We were told just to remember who our partner was, remember the word, and then we went off and did some other things. And I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes later, the instructions for the game were revealed. And that was, we were to close our eyes, spin around, we were in a big room, and then just start calling out your word and try to find your partner. And so I'm listening to the instructions, I'm going, okay, so my strategy is I'm going to try to sort of get a sense of where the center of the room is from other people's voices, and I'm going to move towards the center of the room, calling out book. And so I'm thinking, okay, that's my strategy. And Robin says, okay, go. And then the room, of course, just erupts into chaos as everybody is yelling these words. And so I'm immediately like stumped and just gone, well, that strategy's not going to work. And so I just stopped and was quiet and trying to think of a new strategy, which of course was the right strategy, to stop and be quiet, because eventually people found each other and the room got a bit quieter. And then across the way I hear shelf, and I go book, and I start moving towards shelf, eyes closed, hands out, and eventually I'm standing there holding hands with AJ, and we open our eyes, and the look of elation on his face was an absolute mirror of the look of elation that I was feeling of this incredibly complex and overwhelming task had suddenly turned into an easy, joyful process. And I love that. I love that. That's a big learning. So the other big takeaway from the course was really the connections that were made. I mean, it's such a beautiful group of humans with common interest and intent, while still having a beautiful diversity of age and backgrounds. And yeah. And I got a few words just to sort of help remind me of some of those connections. And maybe this is sort of also partly an echo of the content, because I think everybody takes something different out of the course. And so nature is one of the words that comes to mind. So some people took away, for them, that was one of the highlights, was, you know, there's a few moments where we got to sit down by the Mary River and walk through forests that people had set up on their properties. And just that, recognizing that healing power of nature and the importance of time to just sit and be. And so that was a beautiful part of the course. Community was another big takeaway for a lot of people on the course, and for me as well. And just that sense of connection, and I suppose the more sort of social aspects of permaculture. There's some beautiful, inspiring people with visions of setting up eco-villages and extending their existing communities within Northley Street Farm, for example. People thinking about taking some alternate money solutions into their local communities, Tambourine Mountain. Being in community can also mean just helping other people establish a sense of community, and so mentoring people with visions and ideas. And then the other sort of theme and idea around the connections was, I suppose, a bit more of a personal sense of things. So it's interesting seeing some of the takeaways people had around integrating, I guess, sort of personal and professional aspects of their life, or applying the themes and principles of permaculture into their existing plans for their life. Thinking about becoming educators, thinking about becoming journalists, thinking about taking permaculture around the globe, back to Japan, or Korea or Philippines or into Thailand. You know, for quite a few people, the knowledge and skills I think they got out of the permaculture were much more applicable to their bit of land that they had. So whether it was just looking at their own garden space again, or looking at the properties that they live on, or applying the principles to the land about how to be better in harmony with nature, how to better design for nature. And then the last area I've got is around soul. And I really love this one. I think it was probably a bit of a takeaway for me as well. Someone mentioned the philosophy of frugal hedonism. And I really love that phrase or that idea. This idea that life doesn't have to be that complicated. I had a conversation with someone about death, about the moment of dying, and what sort of, how would you like to die, I guess was sort of the question. And I said I'd love to be, somewhere beautiful in nature, maybe on the top of the hill, having a hike to the top of the hill with someone that I love, basically make love, have a good meal, and maybe just fall asleep and fade away. And I'm like, that sounds like the perfect way to die to me. I would love to have that existence. And in many ways, I don't have to wait for death to experience that. Life provides those opportunities to it doesn't have to be that complicated. It can be as simple as the joy of being in someone else's company, of feeling connected, feeling loved, to be, look around right now in the middle of this beautiful rainforest, feeling connected to the birds that are singing in the sunlight coming through. So much joy. And so I love that frugal hedonism. One of the other beautiful things about the course was the place where it was held at Crystal Waters Permaculture Village, which is it's a world first intentional permaculture village set up in 1980 something, late 80s. It has 80 residential lots of 1 acre in size, set on 640 acres, the headland of the Mary River, on Jinnaburra and Gubbi Gubbi land. And so to be able to do the course in that location was amazing and incredible. And most afternoons we would get out of the classroom and go and tour and have visits of people's properties to see permaculture in action and different interpretations of permaculture. And that was so beautiful and incredible, and the people so generous. And I'm certainly not a gardener or have a green thumb, but I loved that you would turn up at someone's place and you would be getting fed as you walked around by just picking stuff off. Yeah, try this, eat this. Amazing. And I had the pleasure of staying on after the course for about a week and a half, and to just get a bit more sense of the community and getting involved in pizza night and trivia quizzes and even just life around the campground with various people coming and going, as well as people that had been there. And so that was really another sort of special and unexpected benefit of being in that place. So, what did I take away from the course? I really like this idea of, it's both a physical and metaphorical thing, in that I did take away a seed. One of the activities, lectures, parts of the course was about seed saving and seed harvesting. And so I've got a little packet of self-made packet I've made myself of marigold seeds that I have, that I can plant and grow a marigold seed. But more importantly, I have a metaphorical, a symbolic, a virtual seed. All of this knowledge, this idea of, seeds are such a small little thing, but they contain so much information and power and opportunity and potential. And that's really what I've taken out of the course, is all this knowledge that's just, by osmosis, hopefully, become a part of me. And I don't know what I'm going to do with that knowledge, if anything. I don't know, whether anything will grow. But I love that I have that knowledge, and I love that I just have this sense that it'll be a part of my future in some way. It's yet to be revealed. So I look forward to finding out what that means. And the other big takeaway is really heart lines between me and basically everybody that I met on the course. So many beautiful connections. And again, I'm really curious to see how those connections play out, how those heart lines draw me into certain things in life or not. And probably my last takeaway out of the course is really just this. I think I sort of already knew it, but just this confirmation that I still have more recipes to collect. I'm not yet ready to take root. Crystal Waters is a beautiful place, and I can so well imagine, part of why I sold my property was that realization that it's not something I was going to be able to do on my own to have this sustainable life, and that I do need to find a community. And having the pleasure of being able to stay on a bit longer after the course and feel a lovely invitation and offering to be a part of that community, and to be welcomed and experienced in that community. I'm thinking in particular of a Monday night dinner that I was invited to be a part of with a sharing circle, and just seeing how you can live together and also live apart, how to have space. And for me in particular, still perhaps doing some inner work, and not wanting to, I feel like the layers of the compost, I'm still trying to work out how to integrate myself into the compost of life. Because I guess it seems like perhaps one of the challenges of intentional communities are facing is that some people are just sort of leaning on it and abusing it as a place to solve their problems. And so I certainly don't want to do that. At the same time, I don't want to be drained by not having done enough work to be able to set my own boundaries and know what I need and what I value. So that was a real, I guess, somewhat unexpected and delightful benefit of lingering a bit after the course to be a part of that experience and to learn that. And so I return to the question of what is permaculture. Having now done the course, how did it change my original definition as I came in about it being a way to bring humanity back into harmony with the planet, the planet? The people, if anyone's watching this, they probably fall into two categories: people that already know what permaculture is and have their own definition, And I don't think I have anything more to add for those people. And then there's people that have not familiar with the word, and then they're trying to understand. And I guess my answer to them, to those people, is it is just a word. It's just a word. And the word now has a much richer and deeper meaning for me. It means so much more than what it did than when I started. And I carry that definition here in my heart. And I don't know that I can put that into words. It's a lived experience. It's an invitation to come up with your own definition, to explore it, to be connected with like-minded people and contribute to their definition and help shape it. It is just a word. And what we do with that word is up to all of us. So I certainly feel it is a word that has enriched my life. And I think if it's a word that's new to you and any of this resonates, then go explore it further.